Okay, my talk actually builds very nicely on what Ellen has said about the ways in which universities are quite willing and complicit in the rhetoric around excellence, world-classness, and making claims to prestige based on these highly questionable metrics. I want to talk a bit about the prestige claims that UK universities make, the kinds of things that they choose to emphasize as worthy of praise, worthy of esteem, and the things that they tend to downplay. I want to talk about how the rhetoric measures up against the empirical reality. Is it all talk, or are universities genuinely living up to the excellence that they claim? And just as importantly, I also want to talk about the implications of the kinds of prestige claims being made currently for issues of equitable access to higher education. Okay, so I guess if you want to start looking at the prestige claims made by UK universities, there is no better place to start than going to the web page of the Russell Group. I'm assuming that everybody in this room has heard of the Russell Group, the 24 UK universities that lay claim to be the UK's leading institutions, the jewels in the crown of the sector, no less. This is something taken from their main homepage, and it gives just a very clear indication of the kinds of things that are highlighted as indicators of esteem and prestige in the UK context, and indeed pretty much everywhere. So the very first thing that is mentioned, as Ellen has spoken about, is research. Research is the number one indicator of esteem currently. Quantity of research, measured quality of research, position of the research function of the university, not just in the national but in the global field. That is the number one source of esteem in the current climate. Education is secondary always. Education is always mentioned as a source of esteem and prestige, right? But it's always secondary to education. But there's always a claim made to delivering high-quality education, but you'll always see in universities like the Russell Group that are laying claim to be the best universities, the justification for the education being high quality is simply that it's research-led, as though research-led education, enough said, right? That's all you need to know about the quality of this education. It's research-led. Obviously, it's amazing. There's a big deal made about being attractive to people from around the world, right? To operating in a global field when it comes to competitive funding, when it comes to attracting staff, and when it comes to attracting students, huge source of prestige. Where there's acknowledgement of equity issues in access, it's minimized, it's put on to others, it's not our problem to solve, deep-rooted causes. We can just do a little bit, but don't expect us to fix it. That's not what elite universities do. And generally speaking, leave us alone, let us get on with it, right? We know what we're doing. You don't need to regulate us, we're fine. Just let us be marvelous, right? So one thing I want to talk about is the Russell Group as a thing, right? This is work from a paper that was published a few years ago, but just in case you haven't seen it, I want to talk about it a little bit. When you start to look empirically at some of the metrics of excellence and world-classness, and ask, is the Russell Group really the jewels in the crown of the sector? What you find very clearly is, no, that's not the case. That the Russell Group actually is a collection of old universities. They're indistinguishable from the other 30 or 40 so old universities. They're not really special. Oxford and Cambridge are special in a weird and unusual way, right? But the Russell Group is really just a clever branding exercise that enables a small number of old universities to pretend they're better than everybody else and to ride the coattails of the esteem of Oxford and Cambridge. And it allows Oxford and Cambridge and the other 22 universities to lobby with the safety of numbers, right? To lobby in their self-interest in the safety of numbers. So it's not just Oxford or just Durham trying to opportunity hoard and claim all the resources for themselves. It's 24 of them going at it. Safety in numbers for the lobbying. What the empirical evidence does show, however, is that old universities and new universities, there's a big world of difference between them in terms of these prestige markers. And certainly old universities can claim to be more research intensive and can claim to be more academically selective. What they don't tend to trumpet, but is absolutely true, is that they're also way richer and way posher. And these are things that they actually derive a lot of their esteem from at the end of the day. My own institution included, Durham is on the map because it's rich and posh, basically, as well as being research intensive and academically selective. These things are downplayed, but they feed into the prestige, the implicit prestige claims that are made and the position taking. So the evidence also is very clear that old universities are not generally better than new universities at one crucial part of their remit, and I think you probably know what that is, right? Teaching their students. So there are 24 Russell Group universities. How many of them have gold TEF rating? I think it's about 10. Many of them have terrible NSS scores. We don't measure teaching quality very well, but the metrics that we have tell us that these universities should not be claiming to be prestigious and world-class in terms of their teaching and above everybody else, because they're certainly not. And that is actually particularly worrying given that they've got posh students who are really well prepared and they've got all the really fabulous resources with which to educate people. Okay. Now, I think we should always question these claims to excellence, but we should also think about what the knock-on effects are for equity of the way that excellence is framed. So it's really very clear that the two big signifiers of excellence currently are, as Ellen has said, the researchiness of the university, the research intensiveness and measured quality of research. And the second thing is how academically selective. How high can you set your grades to select your students? But both of these things obstruct equity hugely. They do this partly by making it actually impossible to be an excellent university and to have many disadvantaged students among your number, right? It's actually, those two things are incompatible with the way that excellence is construed, because if excellence means having the highest possible entry requirements that the market can bear, then you're only going to have a smattering of working class students, for example. It will be the heroic disadvantaged who have made the grade despite all the odds. And when you talk to admission selectors, they say, what we're looking for is the diamonds in the rough, those who have come through a really core adversity, but still managed to get AAA star at A level, They're not thinking, they understand that grades are actually not an objective marker of potential, but this thinking in terms of excellence means academic selectivity stops them from being genuinely progressive when it comes to entry requirements and widening participation through, for example, reduced entry requirements for disadvantaged learners. And a related problem is that because academic selectivity is so key to the definition of an excellent university, and because research is prioritised over teaching, in truth, these prestige-claiming universities are only really willing and possibly only really able to teach those who can hit the ground running, who can benefit by osmosis from being around world-class researchers, who can benefit from world-class facilities without actually being, dare I say it, taught, educated, supported to learn. So you see admission selectors saying, well, we have to be really careful because the way we educate here is very traditional and we don't want to set people up to fail. And essentially what they're saying is we don't actually teach people at this institution, we only take them if they're already fully formed and could walk out of the door tomorrow with a 2-1. So I want to conclude by arguing that we really need to push on widening this definition of excellence, right, if we're going to get anywhere with improving equity. It really is, when you think about it, untenable to say excellence is identified by an institution that just admits people who are bound to succeed, regardless of what the institution does, regardless of what you do as an educational institution. And given that universities are supposed to be educational institutions, surely part of the definition of excellence needs to be supporting learners to achieve their potential, actually educating them. Okay, thank you.